Hello and welcome to the FATBOSS guide to the Sun King's Salvation encounter in Castle Nathria.
Yes, this two-phase encounter is actually very difficult, however it becomes virtually trivial just by stacking healers. Now there's a fair amount to explain, so let's jump straight in.
So Kel'Thas sits on a platform starting at 10% health. Your objective is to get him to 100% health, at which point the fight will end. He is a friendly target and you must heal him to 45% to start phase 2. You then must deal with a shade copy of him, deal 10% damage to that which will heal Kel'Thas up to 55%. You then must heal Kel'Thas to 90% in your final phase 1 to activate the final phase 2 where you kill the shade off, which ends the encounter. Whilst up on the platform during phase 1, waves of adds will come in on a timer. These waves are preset and get harder to deal with as time goes on, to the point where it becomes close to impossible to deal with them, as the raid damage becomes so high that healers need to spend most of their attention on the raid rather than healing Kel'Thas. But the adds will stop spawning during phase 2, so it's vital that you push that as soon as possible. As a result, healers are the most important aspect of the fight, which is why you want to bring more than you usually do. To give you a rough idea, in our 26-man raid we used 6, but in hindsight using 7 or 8 would have been even better. To add, we stacked 4 of the best healers for this fight, which are Holy Priests. Whilst they don't necessarily do the most healing into Kel'Thas, Guardian Spirit is just flat out broken here. By having 4 of them and rotating them whenever they came up, Kel'Thas was essentially taking 60% increased healing for 40 seconds, and if you throw in a Mastery stack Resto Druid or Shaman or a Paladin with wings up during that time frame, you'll see the boss health fly up super fast. But it's important for us to clarify, you don't need Holy Priest stacking to do this fight, it just helps a whole lot. Any hybrid DPS in your raid should also be dumping all of their mana into healing the boss whenever they can. As for the players in your raid that cannot directly heal the boss, they can use the pedestals instead. Directly under the boss there is 4 pedestals, 2 on each side. Players can click to begin channeling. This heals the boss whilst applying a stacking debuff that increases the damage you take from this channel. It doesn't heal the boss for that much, but it's definitely better than nothing. We just recommend that you never go above 3 stacks, because the moment you do, you're going to divert your healer's attention onto you rather than healing Kel'Thas. Also, it's a good idea to not use the pedestals whilst any adds are up. Killing them off and keeping the fight under control is far more important. So let's break down this first phase 1 by add wave just so you understand all their mechanics, and show you exactly when you want to push the boss.
So on the pool you'll have 4 occultists. They have a long list of abilities but so little health. All you need to know is that you need to interrupt their casts, with Vulgar Brand being the most important, group them up and cleave them down. When they die they'll drop a friendly target essence font. You can heal these to heal the boss, but do it fast as they are taking ticking damage over time. You also have 2 assassins. You want to focus them down at all times. They'll target random players, blink behind them and apply a nasty dot to anyone nearby. If you're targeted you want to move away from anyone else so you don't spread the dot. When they're low, they'll begin to cast Return to Stone. This heals them to full, so make sure you kill them before the cast completes. And finally, you'll have Torturer Darathos. This guy looks mean, but actually has the lowest damage priority. He'll just cast Greater Castigation on random players, dealing some splash damage, just spread out if you're targeted. Now around 60 seconds into the fight, you'll get your first Rockbound Vanquisher. He'll slam the tank and apply a dot that stacks. You'll want to taunt around 3 stacks or so. He also deals raid-wide damage with his slam, but each time this is cast it's more deadly, so whilst he isn't a massive threat early, he can become a real issue if left up for too long. Shortly after he spawned you'll get another set of assassins and occultists. You want to focus down these assassins whilst cleaving the occultists, and it's around this time you want to push the boss to 45%. As long as you've done this before around 1 minute 45 into the fight, you'll get a good transition into phase 2. We pushed slightly too late on our kill and got Pestering Fiends on our transition. You'll just want to cleave these down as a low priority, and ideally if you can move away from them when they die then you should, because they do explode, dealing a little bit of damage to people nearby. Now before showing you how phase 2 works, we feel it's important to show you why it's a good idea to push before 1 minute 45. After the Fiends you'll get a new Rockbound Vanquisher and Soul Infusers. These infusers run towards Kel'Thas and use the pedestals, removing a ton of his health, so you're forced to nuke them down and CC them before they reach him. You also want to try and stagger their deaths, because when they die, they'll drop an orb that any player can click on. Doing so does give them a 50% healing increase for 14 seconds. Clicking a new orb will refresh the duration and give you another stack, and this caps out at 4. Whilst this sounds great, it really isn't, as a massive wave of assassins will spawn around the exact same time that you get your 4th orb buff, which forces pretty much the entire healing team to focus on keeping the raid alive, with a single guy with the orb pumping into the boss. To add, pushing at this time just gets really messy simply because of the amount of adds up.
When phase 2 begins, you'll want to finish off any of the adds and you'll want to drag the boss to the edge of the room and have the raid stack closely behind. This is because the boss has a frontal cleave that he does on a tank that applies a stacking dot, so keep away from the front of him and tanks you'll want to taunt on too. The boss will also debuff a random player with Ember Blast. This does a lethal amount of damage to that player, split between all players within their targeting circle. This also leaves behind a large patch of fire that lasts the entire fight. You'll want the majority of your raid to soak this to split the damage, and this is a good point to use damage reduction cooldowns and healing cooldowns. This ability, however, can be feigned, vanished, and immuned, so if you're able to completely solo it, then you should. The Shade will also target a random player with Blazing Surge. This cone deals a massive amount of damage if you're caught, but if you're stood close to the boss, it's really easy to move from. This cone will also leave behind a patch of fire, so if you can bait it against the wall, that is definitely the best play to do. In this phase, you'll also notice the Phoenix ads. These guys will just focus down random players whilst dealing pulsing damage to anyone within 6 yards of themselves, leaving fire patches on the ground. Instead of swapping and killing them off, you'll want to just crowd control them. Almost everything works, just keep them at bay at all times, and you can just simply ignore them. If any of them do somehow die for whatever reason, they will respawn 20 seconds later, so keep that in mind as you may have to swap back to them just to keep them in place. Once you've removed 10% of the Shade's health, he'll disappear, the Phoenixes will despawn, and phase 1 will begin again with new ad timers.
Now, whilst the waves are slightly different from the first phase one, just keep to the same rule of nuking the assassins first and you'll be fine. 1 minute 45 or so into this second phase one, you'll get to the chaotic part again, where soul infusers spawn. Whilst it's possible to push before this point, it's not necessarily a wipe if you don't. Shortly after the soul infusers, you'll get more assassins and occultists. It's at this point you want to use Bloodlust and clear up any of the ads, focusing on the assassins first whilst pushing the boss simultaneously. This can get very hectic at this part of the fight, as you're going to have the final phase 2 with quite a few of the ads up. As long as the ads are focused and the assassins aren't cleaving dots onto the entire raid, you should be able to make this transition. You may also want to consider sacrificing players off with the Ember Blast from this point also, as that damage, on top of all the damage the ads are dealing to you, can really easily combo people. But once you've got the ads under control, you'll just have to focus the boss and keep the Phoenixes under control, which, providing most of your raid is still alive, will leave you with a pretty easy finish to the fight.
But thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to have a more thorough breakdown of the fight with more emphasis on the ads and all of their different abilities, then do go and check out our written guide over on Wowhead. You can find a link for that in the description below. Take care, and we will see you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.